Good morning. Right, so I'm on a walk. Another one of my walk and talk series. Different walk today though. Decided to go a slightly different way. I'm walking through a sort of nature reserve, just come from that over there, which is just near where I live. And I'm taking Nora for a little trot along and just sort of musing about my solo record. Actually, I thought quite a moment to have a little chat about, I guess, the songwriting process in actual reality, you know, with an active project. I began the writing of this, what will be my second Toby and the Whole Truth album, I guess probably about 10 years ago. Because one thing that I do a lot of is I write a lot of ideas, and often they come out of nowhere. I think this is a very common sort of way that a lot of songwriters do work. You know, you can often, the best stuff I've ever written is absent-minded. You know, never knew what I was trying to do. It just sort of happened. I picked up the guitar one day, you know, not assuming anything, but just kind of something kind of pops out, and what I tend to do is then put it down onto my phone and often sort of leave it, come back to it a couple of days later, just see if it has the same potency, you know, that sort of thing. And it's a kind of strange experience because it is kind of unknown and, you know, uncharted. There's no planning as such. You can often come up with a lot of very diverse ideas. You know, and you know, for me as a songwriter, I've found that I need a project. You know, I need to sort of focus on something, whether it's Wayward Sons or working on songs for other people or on a film or anything like this. I need to kind of frame it in something, you know. So what that kind of really means is that you often, in these absent-minded moments, come up with stuff you weren't expecting and doesn't have any relevance to the thing you're doing at the time, and so you sort of shelve it, you know. So when I was kind of starting to sort of circle the idea of making a second solo record after 20 or 25 years, I think it is, absence of doing so, or 20 years, it was kind of, where am I going to get the material from? What's it all about? Have I got something to say? I want to be relevant. I don't want to just talk about a load of old nonsense. There's got to be a reason, you know. So I often look for what those reasons are in the sort of simple ideas that may be laying around. Now, it's not as easy as you might think, because I counted on my phone yesterday that there's 333, believe it or not, ideas on my phone now. I'd say a good 100 of those have made it onto records, but there's still 233 that haven't been used. Some of it is film music I've developed on projects that haven't gone anywhere, but a lot of it's kind of scratchy little ideas that sort of form the kernels of concepts and songs, you know. So I started looking at all those and trying to find a sort of narrative thread, and for a little while kind of gathered maybe 6 or 7 songs together that I really liked, ideas, and sort of developed them a little bit further and put them into a little bracket, I guess. And recently it started to become more pertinent that I needed to do this, mainly because of a number of things that have happened to me in my life in general. And this is a key thing. You know, whenever I make records, like I say, they usually have to be bracketed in a project. Solo records is different. You have to feel compelled to do it. You have, like I say, you have to have something to say. And I think when I made the first Toby and Whole Truth record, Is Bliss, it was in reaction to Little Angel splitting up and my anger and frustration and kind of fear, I guess, and sadness about how that project came to an end and what it meant to me. But also I was maturing, you know, I was becoming a different person, a different writer. I was older. I'd like to think a little bit smarter, but I certainly had an epiphanal moment where I kind of woke up and needed to talk about things. And so it was driven by that process, driven by that need to be as honest as possible and to actually say precisely what I felt about the time. And it was a really awakening for me as a songwriter, because I'd never really done that. With Little Angels, it was a lot more there was a direction, you know, a specific direction. It was a guitar band, you know, the 80s we were still late 80s. Guitar rock was a big thing, you know, we were listening to all the obvious suspects there, you know, Van Halen's, Bon Jovi's, Def Leppard, and we wanted to be that. And so it had a kind of commercial need and were driven by the fact that we were youthful, etc. So all those things went into this sort of, I guess in some respects, especially at the very beginning, a little bit kind of, I guess, one-dimensional in some respects. I don't mean that in any disrespect to the band at all, because I wrote a lot of this stuff. But it was driven by different things than it is now, you know. So making Ignorance was a real sort of step forward for me as a creative person. I was able to explore a side of myself that, in many respects, I didn't even know existed at the time. That's just immaturity. But it helped me really develop, and I sort of made that record based on a kind of need to explore my psyche, you know. And I think the same is happening here. I've had a lot of things go on in my life in the last few years. I think it goes back to moving down here, really, Somerset from Yorkshire. You know, there's a lot of upheaval, and then I was starting I can't come through here now. That's annoying. I'm supposed to be walking down here. Okay, we'll have to go a different way. Never mind. See, bit of metaphor there. A barrier in the way. I mean, I think this is probably a good thing to talk about. You know, what are your barriers? You know, what are the things that get in your way, and how do you as artistic people deal with that? You know, it's a catharsis being artistic. You're able to sort of, you know, somehow create something real, something tangible. Well, you hope it is anyway. And you've only got yourself, you know. There's one thing I sort of think is really important about songwriting is that you're not fearful. Nothing's right, nothing's wrong. You know, it really isn't. And I grow tired and weary as an older person, listening to the sort of rhetoric of you know, songwriters and other songwriters and creatives that talk about this. You know, it seems to clothe it in this sense of mystique and mystery, and it isn't. I don't think it is. I think it's a very, very human, extremely human thing to explore yourself creatively. And as a musician, I haven't found it difficult to do. Whether it's any good or not is entirely in the ears of the listener. You know, it's not down to me to say in lots of respects. All I can do is create something that I think is getting to the point, you know. Now, don't get me wrong, art is magic. You know, of course there is a level of mystery to it. You know, I don't want to sound like I'm contradicting myself, but what I mean is I don't like the sort of assertion that some people know better than others. I just don't believe it. I think you've all got our own ways of talking about it, and it just depends on how you want to do it, you know. So it does come down to a very personal approach, you know, and therein lies the beauty of it. And so, yeah, I think, getting back to my solo record, because I am meandering here, I know, I've focused on what is the central reasoning behind making this album, and I've realised what it is. It's actually about me talking about recovery. I mean, as we all go through life, we experience different things. Obviously, it's a bit of a sweeping statement, isn't it? But what I mean is, you know, the challenges, the things that sort of come out of nowhere, you don't expect, and you have to overcome them, or don't. Or sometimes a lot of people don't overcome them, you know. And so, I've had my own. Without going into massive detail, I've had my own challenges with regard to this over the last few years. Hang on 2 seconds. I just gone to the town park here, and they've got a lovely sort of auditorium, amphitheatre, yeah, that they built. Doesn't seem to get used enough, I don't think. But anyway, I'm going to sit down here for a moment and carry on talking. So yeah, it's really about looking at yourself, I think, really, and trying to find a way into explaining. Or I often sort of think that songwriting or creating any art at all for the artist it's a deep dive into yourself that you're unaware of what the results are going to be. It's very revealing. It can be actually quite frightening sometimes, you know, or, you know, certainly surprising with what you can come out with, you know, because it's a little bit of the unknown. I mean, but there also has to be a kind of practical need as to what the record you're going to make, or, you know, how that's going to appear, and how people are going to understand it, how it's going to communicate those ideas. So I think the challenge of making solo music is finding that trail, finding that narrative line. And like I say, taking these deep dives can be often painful, often very joyful, but it needs to be honest. That's the key thing for me, really, the honesty of it all. Like, for instance, I had Dave Kemp come down and work with me on some songs just before Christmas. We had a week or so together, and I was really delighted by the stuff that came out of that session. But weirdly, I kind of woke up the next morning after Dave had gone home, feeling very sort of settled, and couldn't quite put my finger on what it was all about. And when I went back and listened to the ideas, which we'd recorded on my on basic demos on Pro Tools, just like one mic open in the room, that sort of thing, it just didn't make the grade, and I couldn't figure out why. I liked some of the riffs, I liked some of the melodies, I liked some of the ideas, but really it was lacking something. And it became I got really depressed about it. It felt really sort of like encumbered by something or other, and couldn't put my finger on it at all. The result of that is that I decided to leave it, and I wasn't going to make the record. And I sort of rang everyone up that I'd been talking to and said, no, I'm not going to do this, I'm not going to make the record. And no one could kind of understand why. Everyone was saying, well, I thought you were into it, and cancelled studio time, all sorts of things happened. Pause a moment there because there was a dog going absolutely nuts in the background. Yeah, so I then had to sort of, I guess, retrace my steps, and I started to feel like we all do as creators, an imposter. That imposter syndrome thing kicked in. I mean, this gets talked about a lot, but it's definitely to do with mental health. Like I said earlier in this conversation, I've had my own mental health struggles. We don't talk about it enough. And also, I've been very frustrated in recent times is that the discussion of mental health has now also almost become a meme. It's become a kind of like a derisory thing. Oh, you've got a label, have you? Well, sadly, the human experience is full of difficulties, as we know. And if you go back to when I was a kid, for instance, and some of the stuff I suffered at school, we weren't able to talk about it. It was an impossible thing to do. I didn't discuss it with my parents. I kept it quiet. It was something I hid away and tried to bury, and now, having experienced my kids going through school, they had, pastoral care and help. And I think it's massively important. It's made my kids a lot more rounded, and they're able to sort of talk about things without feeling like they're being judged, or they feel that they're somehow strange or made a mistake with something. They're just basically going through the normal human stuff. People to deride it and sort of say, oh yeah, you got yourself a label, I think it's disgusting and unfair. And I think we need to talk about it more, especially men. Men are useless at talking about their feelings. Bit of an obvious thing to say, I know, it's well documented, but it's the total truth. And so I found writing songs in lots of ways incredibly revealing over the years, because it's sometimes been stuff that I really didn't want to say in public, but I'm quite willing to say in a piece of music. And so what I did was, I dismissed all of those ideas that I did with Dave. I put them aside. I've come back to a couple now, but it actually gave me that kick in the backside to go, well, okay, if that wasn't, why is this a mistake? Why isn't this stuff working? And I realised what it was. I was trying to protect myself. I was not examining myself hard enough in lots of ways. And so I started writing again, and over the last 2 or 3 weeks I've written pretty much the majority of what will be my second Toby and Whole Truth record. And one of the key songs I've written is a song called Look Out, and I decided to call the album Look Out because it has a number of connotations to it. There is the kind of look out as in be cautious, there's the lookout, meaning the place that you stand to look out for things, and also this sort of sense of, if you're a lookout, you're the one looking out for stuff, so there's a kind of, and the more I thought about it, the more it kind of had layers, and the more it felt really akin to exactly talking about the things I wanted to talk about, which again, like I said earlier, is about recovery. How does recovery look for me? Well, for me it is like coming out of a fog. Lots of things have happened to me recently that have made me feel a lot more enlivened, a lot less brain fog, a lot less confused about certain aspects of my life, and it feels like I'm coming out of the best metaphor in lots of ways, you say, like wandering out of a fog bank, and you're starting to see the sort of clear horizon, and things are clearing up around you, and that's what it feels like. And so a lot of the songs, well, most of the songs that I've written in this period are to do with that. How do I talk about recovering? What are the aspects of feeling that you're in recovery and you're feeling you're gaining a foothold again in whatever aspect of life you need to? How does that feel? What does that look like? And what does it sound like? And weirdly, it's not what I expected. I've written a lot of very up-tempo, very punky, attitude-driven songs of determination, and within that kind of like sense, I'm getting the energy that it's about, you know, lots of very positive things. I mean, you know, I think up-tempo rock and roll at its best, you know, gives over that sort of passion, the energy, the passionate energy. You know, the BPMs, I think, you know, can be quite specific in terms of how they feel, seriously. You know, I mean, they always say one of the key things about pop music is that a 132 BPM, or around about there, is the kind of dance floor. And there's no mystery as to why 120 is the sort of standalone, you know, default position for you know, Pro Tools in terms of the metronomes, is because that is really the this average heartbeat of a human being. So these things all matter, you know, and so as soon as you get up into the 160s and the 170s, which I've got 2 or 3 songs that are in that sort of BPM, you start to sort of feel your heart race, you know, the power and the energy of it. And it doesn't have to be about aggression, it's more about sort of, yeah, positive energy, really. So yeah, I'm 19 songs on the slate now. It started off with 40 odd, and I've got it down to 19. I've got 6 on the B list, and very pleased with what's happening so far. Some really unusual stuff, and I think, you know, you've got to be very careful making music, I think. Personally, I mean, maybe people don't agree with this at all, and obviously that's entirely up to you, but I sort of think, I don't try and emulate anybody at all. You know, we all use points of reference. We all have our favourite artists, our favourite records, that kind of thing. But you've got to be very careful. You don't, you know, pinpoint it too much. You know, just use it as a kind of, I don't know, a channeling thing, really. But you know, I'm all about the individual. I'm all about doing something that, you know, can not shock necessarily, but can surprise. I'm not saying that I'm going to create something that's world-beating. Probably not. Most likely I'm doing this really just for myself, but I think that is the key to it. You know, when you make music or you create any art, you have to do it for yourself first and foremost, and it's then down to how people perceive that, you know. On from the process of the actual writing, which is ongoing. I'm still doing it, and you know, I'll just let you into a little moment of my life with the writing process. I mean, last night I sat down to write a love song. I've got about 4 or 5 love songs, which is unusual for me. I don't tend to write them, but it's a kind of aspect of love and care that is about how I am reacting to getting older as a person, and how me and my wife are as people, and what that relationship is. And I'm examining that a little bit, which has been really interesting. But I sort of sat down with I've got this title, which I'm not going to reveal at the moment, which I really like, and it really sort of sums up the concept. But I could not find a way of talking about the subject matter. It was really difficult. And I sort of sat there for a couple of hours jotting stuff down and messing around with sort of couplets of words, and it just felt so flat and bland, you know. But the actual chorus line, the sort of main key elemental part of the song, is, I think, really, really great, and it's probably one of the coolest things I've written, you know. But I just can't find my way in yet. But that's okay, because that's part of the process. Every day is a step forward, and sometimes 2 steps back. Lovely round here, still in the town park. Just met a lady with another dog, which is always nice. So the process goes on, and it, you know, it doesn't stop until you're actually, I guess, you press stop on the mixes. And I guess this is the bit I love the most, really, is the creative process. The sat down, you know, scratching your head, getting those moments of real clarity, and when you realise you've touched upon something that's really got to the heart of what you're trying to talk about. And I've had a couple of moments like that. I mean, yesterday I demoed a couple of ideas that have been, I think, on the back burner a little bit, but I worked on them for a couple of hours, and all of a sudden they came alive. And they're no longer on the back burner, you know. So it's a really exciting thing. I think one of the barometers for me is that if I want to listen to it, I know that sounds nuts, but you know, often when I've made records with other bands and, you know, things I've done over the years, is that often I don't want to listen to it. And it's not because I don't like it, it's because you're bored of hearing it. You know, you've spent so much time working on it that you end up not listening to it again. But I do think that if you want to keep listening and you're getting excited about it yourself, then it means you've sort of somehow touched that, like I say, you've touched the right nerve. So there we are. I feel pretty equipped to start this second solo record. Like I say, very different from making band albums and stuff. And I think I have found the trail now. It's, as ever with this stuff, is very interesting process. It's a process of self-discovery and self-analysis. But more than anything else, I just want to go and make a really good record. I want to make something that's fun and exciting to listen to and vibrant and has, like always, I want something to say, so those that are listening to it can get something out of it. And you never know whether you're going to get it right. No one goes into a studio to make a rubbish record. Really don't. You go in to try and do the best you possibly can. And I got some great people around me. I've got my old mate Matt Eldridge back on drums, who is a fantastic, wonderful player. I'm really looking forward to re-hooking up with him, doing the studio stuff. And great bass player called Chris Blandon. Good old Sam Wood, he's playing some guitar on this record. I'm playing quite a lot of the guitar myself. Stand by, or look out, I should say, for that. And of course Dave Kemp is involved in pretty much every aspect of making of this album. Back at Vale Studios, where I've worked a lot before, made a lot of records there, and I'm working with Chris Diada as an engineer on this album and self-producing. So all the pieces are in place. All that remains, I've got the rest of this month, the month of March, to just finalize the songs. I think I'm probably likely to record anywhere between 16 and 20 songs, depending on how well they go. Yeah, so looking forward to it. I hope this has been vaguely informative. It does sound a little bit like I'm sort of meandering, and because this is the thing, it's hard to explain this stuff. It's really hard. You've got to do it. A lot of the processes of making a record goes on in your head and in your heart, and it's stuff you don't reveal. It's the corners and the shadows that are the most important stuff, and you don't want people looking into those too much, I don't think, whilst you're making it, whilst you're writing the material. You've got to sort of somehow hold it close to your chest. Don't reveal it too soon, So anyway, yeah, I'm recording through April, and I'll let you know in due course when the first new music's around. Thanks for watching.